we can go ahead and get things started. But first off, thank you all so much for taking the time. My name is Betty Needle. I'm the Senior Implementation Specialist at Expert Institute, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. And I wanted to introduce all of you to our two guest speakers, the first of which is Dr. Ross Green, who is a member of the Expert Institute team. And not only that, he is the Vice President of Medical Affairs at our company, overseeing our team of over 60 physicians. And he has training in head and neck surgery, plastic surgery, reconstructive surgery, general microvascular, the list goes on. And he also has over 12 peer-reviewed publications and is also well presented on sinus surgery and head and neck oncology. That's his niche specifically. So he'll be telling you all a little bit more about case clinics, what the service is, and how our medical team can assist with screening cases for merit. Secondly, we have Mr. Louis Gertler, who's on the line with us as well. Louis is a partner at Gertler Law Firm, which is based in New Orleans, Louisiana. And Louis has many distinctions. Among them, in 2005, trial lawyers named Louis Gertler as a 2005 Trial Lawyer of the Year Award finalist for his work on the Scott versus American Tobacco Company case. He also is very involved. He's a member of the Board of Governors for the Louisiana Association of Justice and a former chairman of the Louisiana Association for Justice's section on toxics, environment, and pharmaceuticals. And he'll be telling you all a little bit about his experience in working on case clinics with Dr. Green and his team, and how he goes about sending in medical records to work up with our team of in-house doctors. Without further ado, I'll pass things over to Dr. Green. He'll go into a bit more detail on case clinics, and then at the end, we'll have a Q&A where you all can use the Q&A function to ask questions that Louis and Dr. Green can address. Dr. Green, floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Betty. A lot more of an introduction than I deserve, but Louis deserves much more, and I will go into a little bit more on Louis, and I'm gonna move on over to Louis in just a moment, but just I have a few things I wanted to go through just so that everyone's on the same page about what we're chatting about. So for the pros out there that know Expert Institute in and out, sorry for a little bit of a repeat here. I'm going to be focusing on case clinics. I want everyone here to be aware this isn't our only offering. I'm not going to go into the other offerings, but we are available for expert searches, whether it's medical experts, non-medical experts. So always keep in mind, we can get you those accident reconstructionists, life care planners, economists, goose migration experts, you name it, on top of the medical side. So don't just lump us into the medicine category, which I understand why most folks do, or some folks might. We also do strategic research on literature. We're available for quick questions. And we do opposing counsel research or opposing expert research as well as part of Radar. So please let us know offline if you have any questions about that. I'm going to focus on case clinics, which is the instance where, and we'll go through the many reasons you might want to send us a case. You send medical records to my team. I head up a team along with some of my colleagues of over 60 doctors in over 35 specialties. It's about 38 specialties now. So a really large team internally, with the goal of being a consulting expert or a consulting doctor on your cases. If you need testifying experts, we can go through the ins and outs of that. But basically, this is the instance in which you send us medical records and my team roundtables those cases for you. So if it's a case involving EMT, I might need my medical oncologist and my radiation oncologist to then come back and let you know what my thoughts are. But why would you need a case clinic? It's pretty straightforward. You might want to confirm whether a case has merit. This is about 90% of what we see is the merit stage. You can send us cases in any stage. It could be at the deposition stage. You could be going to trial and you want to ask us questions. You want us to review records, but it's usually for merit. We're able to pinpoint liability and causation. We know how difficult let alone how difficult liability can be, but causation being as tricky as it is with all these very, very complicated cases, we're able to source through those with you and parse through the records and let you know what our roundtable thought and approach is. Refining your case theory. I can't tell you the number of times I've I've been approached with a very simple tonsillectomy case where they say, oh, well, it must be the ENT's fault, when there's just so many layers to a botched tonsillectomy where maybe they should have been sent to interventional radiology, or they were sent to interventional radiology and they misidentified an artery or embolized the wrong thing, or didn't treat the patient as I saw. They didn't pack the patient afterwards. Anyway, even the most simple case, medicine is never simple. There's a reason we have so much training, and I don't even know half of medicine. I just know ENT from the head and neck up. It's because it's really complicated. And as many cases as you might see that seem the same approach, having and refining case theories that's specific to that individual case is what's going to help win your case, or at least that's what my attorney clients tell me. We can review imaging. This is something that's often overlooked, but we have a handful of radiologists. We have a musculoskeletal radiologist, a diagnostic general radiologist, a neuroradiologist. We have a breast radiologist. You could send us imaging to do blind reads on. We can also look through them with informed reads if you want our radiologists to know what went on. A lot of cases ride on, what did that CT scan of the abdomen pelvis 2 weeks ago, what did that actually show? And we could really quickly get you that answer. Of course, we could assess the level of damages for your cases and help you understand, does the case that you sent us rise to the level of the damages threshold that you have to take a case that it's financially feasible for you to help your client? We can help parse through that as well. Depot questions. This is a great area that a lot of our clients are more and more, or over the last 5 years I've been at the company, more and more getting privy to that. You call us up, we can talk you through deposition questions after we've reviewed the records. It can be really powerful. You're going to go into those depositions more prepared than you could ever imagine. And preparation is the name of the game, I'm told, with this and many other aspects of handling these cases. So this is a little bit of overkill, but why do you need medical professionals to validate your case? Well, avoiding weak cases. I don't want to minimize number one here. I've been told by many clients, almost every one of my clients, that when we give them a no, it might be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the yes. Sometimes the yes brings up a whole host of, hey, you got a good case, but there are some pain points, versus you should stay clear of this and move on to the next case. And I know Lewis is going to have a few things to say about that, as before we got on, we were chatting a little bit about that. Build your credibility. So saying that you had 4 doctors review your case is going to be really helpful in explaining to a patient, an injured party, your client, or a potential client, why you might not be able to take case, or if they're shopping around, as patients often tend to do, you can let them know, I've had 4 doctors at my disposal reviewing this, and these are the issues that are important, and this is how I can help you. Or even just marketing yourself around the community. Say, hey, I got these 60 plus doctors on retainer that are working for me. Send me your cases to review. We have a really efficient way of handling them. I'm happy to co-counsel with you, whatever the arrangement might be. But it really does build a ton of credibility that you have a lot of these doctors and they're working for you on your team, not telling you what you want to hear, but telling you what you need to hear. Pursue the winners. Goes without saying. We're going to help you identify those winners, and we're going to strengthen them. It's not just, hey, this is a winner. Anyone could seek out a very obvious case of operating on the wrong side or what have you. But in those contexts of the slam dunk cases, which very few are, when you pursue them, you want to make sure you maximize those damages and the winnings for your clients. Assess with diligence and optimize for success, kind of already discussed that. 7 signs you should decline a case. And we're going to walk you through this as part of our review, but the damages are insufficient. Again, can't even count on my hands, even with my toes included, the number of times I say, great case, there's clear liability, I got you on causation, but really, what are we dealing with here? The patient might have a sore throat for a few weeks or might have a weak voice, but isn't a professional singer, is an opera singer, isn't a teacher, doesn't use their voice that much. You know the story. Where that usually then becomes a conversation with us and your client, the patient, being involved, as well as really what is the meat and potatoes of what's going on here. The comorbidities are too steep. Look, we all know your juries, unless you're in some fancy community, gated community, and that's your jurisdiction, that look, the education level is going to be a little bit less than what you and I have as being professionals, to say the least. And you're going to have to argue this, and I don't have to tell you this, in front of folks with 8th grade educations and below, sometimes a little bit above, but that's usually the target range. If a patient has 1,000 comorbidities and we can make a case, at what cost for you as the attorney will that case then take? We all want to help clients and patients as best we can, but sometimes you just can't if it's a case that you just know is going to get caught up in the weeds and the defense is just going to pick apart each comorbidity. So something very interesting to keep in mind. Causation is weak. Clients' claims don't match the record. I mean, look, that happens about 95% of the time. It's not that the client is trying to be disingenuous. That's very rarely my experience, but it's just that there is a gap between us as doctors and our understandings of medicine and, frankly, our inability to properly explain it to patients. It's really something that's on us as a medical community, and clients, your clients, the patients in the cases hear a lot of different things, and they probably hear these, and these things were probably said to them, but the context of it is always very important. So oftentimes we do see that finger pointing, he said, she said, the informed consent type of cases. Those are usually pretty obvious, but we can parse out whether it's he said, she said, or there's really a standard of care issue. And then the case hinges on the informed consent. We all know about informed consent cases. We're happy to help you on them at anyone's risk, but we certainly see those and understand the pitfalls there. So moving on to really why everyone's here. I can't imagine you're here to hear me speak or anything I said there, but hopefully got something out of that. And any questions you have, there's a Q&A box. Please feel free there. We'll also, at the end, show emails. So feel free to shoot us an email at any moment. But Louis Gertler, I met Louis's father first about 5 years ago. And I remember because it was when I was starting at Expert Institute. And it was someone that one of the people on the sales team said, this is a great firm. We've been having trouble really communicating with them since they have been so successful for so many years, which they continue to be. But maybe you can develop a relationship and get to know them. And little did I know, I mean, honestly, in my perspective, it's become a really flourishing friendship with Mike, Louis's father, and Louis, who's really been taking over the seat here. And so really with having Louis here is that I feel like I have a friend here who can really explain to you folks from an objective standpoint what his experience has been. And so really just for starters, I wanted just to open it up and really put Louis on the spot. I think he'll forgive me for this, just to have him say whatever thoughts come to mind about Expert Institute. And we'll have some questions to kind of lead Louis in the right direction in a few cases we've worked on. But Louis, love to give you the floor here.
Sure, appreciate it, Ross. And the first thing I noticed is my profile picture needs to be updated because my hair is a lot grayer than it was when that picture was taken. So that's the first thing I need to say. But in any event, I can't say enough about Ross and how great he's been to work with, and what a pleasure the Expert Institute has been, and how important it's been to our practice. Approximately 20% of our practice is medical malpractice. And in order to discuss how important the Expert Institute is to us, I need to tell everyone a little bit about what we have to deal with in Louisiana with medical malpractice cases. We have a very draconian system in Louisiana where before we can file a medical malpractice lawsuit, you first have to file a claim that goes in front of a panel of 3 physicians in the same specialty as a doctor who you're asserting a claim against. And I'm not sure what the statistics are, but I think it's pretty close to 90% of the time when you submit your claim to this panel, they will rule in favor of the physician. Then you can still go ahead and file your lawsuit in Louisiana, but now you have 3 local physicians who are now going to be testifying against your client on behalf of the doctor in your lawsuit. And then if you overcome that and you get to trial and you get an award, we are capped at $500,000 max in Louisiana, absent a few other very rare circumstances. So these cases are very tough. They're very expensive. And before we, can even begin to take that sort of financial risk and pursue one of these cases, we need to find out hey, is this a case worth pursuing? And the Expert Institute has just done a wonderful job of helping us screen our cases so that we're bringing only those cases which have the highest chance of success forward, and saving ourselves a tremendous amount of work and expense entailed in bringing a case that maybe we shouldn't have accepted in the first place. So Ross and his team at the Expert Institute have been just wonderful in terms of helping us screen cases and find those rare diamonds that we can pursue ahead, towards a trial.
Yeah, and Lewis, you brought up a great point. And there are a few states similar to Louisiana for sure, but Louisiana, just because I work around the country, has a very unique system. And in working with you, our goal, and we customize our work to all our clients, has always been to make sure that we have a very high level of a case if we're going to recommend moving forward for you. It's just one of those conservative areas of the country that when my doctors are reviewing these cases, if it's not going to be one of those cases that's a sure winner, we're going to make sure when presenting the case that we really make sure to highlight the pitfalls for you. So Lewis, I did want to bring up a couple of actual specific cases, and I'm going to unshare my screen just so that I can get the names of them and share with the audience a bit. And maybe you can just chat with, and again, and as we spoke, Lewis, and I'll be candid with everyone else. I mean, look, these are everyone knows their cases that you get so many in and out. Not everyone's going to be front of mind, but just anything that you remember about these cases. So one case, it's the Smith matter. Dr. Jonathan McNeil, he's one of our spine surgeons in-house. You sent us the records, and basically it involves an adult woman who had a spinal fusion with a cage placement, and it was potentially malpositioned. And Dr. McNeil took a look at the records along with the radiology. If you recall a little bit, Lewis, do you recall what ended up happening with that case and maybe how that benefited you in any way?
Well, I remember Dr. McNeil advised me that he didn't believe there was evidence of malpractice in this case. I don't remember a lot of the details because, like you mentioned, I generally, once your team tells me not to pursue a case, I sort of flush it out of my memory and focus on cases that I'm actually, working on. So I don't remember a lot of the details, but I do remember that Dr. McNeil was very helpful in terms of he didn't just tell me that this was a case not worth pursuing. He explained it to me to a level that I could then call my client and explain it to her, and she was satisfied with my explanation. You just don't want to tell a client, a potential client, that, hey, I don't think there's malpractice here, and not give any further detail. If you really want to have credibility in the community, you need to explain to people in detail why there's no malpractice. And Dr. McNeil helped in that regard tremendously.
Wonderful. And Lewis, it actually made me think of a couple of things that I don't believe you utilized for this particular case, but it is available to you, and just like all of our other clients. So a couple of things as part of the case clinic. Not only do you get a round table to review, we're going to record the conversation and create a transcript at the end of it that will be housed in our IQ so that you're not crazily scribbling down notes. For folks who haven't had a case clinic, or for folks who have, hopefully the experience that we want to foster is one where the doctor isn't rushing out to do their spine surgery. They're present for the conversation. They're not driving to their next appointment. You really have the doctor present over Zoom. You're interacting with them, and you can ask all the questions you want. And at the end, you're going to have that transcript, so you're not scribbling down notes and breaking your hand open. And that should allow for creating a demand letter if it moves forward. Or if you have to say, this isn't a case we can help you with, you have that transcript to help you out. And we can also provide you a summary at the end on our letterhead, which is really powerful to say what we reviewed, who helped with the review, and what really, give a little bit of a synopsis of what happened in our mind, and then really a discussion of and a conclusion of the nuts and bolts of this is really why we don't think there's a breach. And that's important, like you said, Lewis. It's not just thumbs down. It's an analysis of why we think that it's not a good case. that I think is really powerful here.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up about questions, because the doctors that I've dealt with at the Expert Institute, part of your team, have all been very patient in terms of answering my questions when I, try to better understand as a layperson the details of why or there is malpractice, why they believe there's malpractice here, or why there's not. And I've never had a doctor I've worked with who's ever shown any sort of impatience or a not a unwillingness to want to answer questions.
Wonderful. And I think a lot of that is when you team with a company that not only has the data and years of experience, but also doctors who are devoting their time to these type of objective reviews, you're going to get really that sit down of, first of all, we're talking the same language, but also we want to make sure that you have the 30 minutes that you need, the 45 minutes you need, or if it's 5 minutes and you're in a rush, fine, that's your prerogative, but that's completely our goal. And I'm glad that was an experience of yours. Another case that I actually thought was pretty interesting, it's the Johnson matter. This was a case of a knee replacement and they nicked the popliteal artery. And this was reviewed by Dr. Strawn. It's a pretty straightforward question, but it's one that just demands a straightforward answer and review. Do you recall anything about that one, Lewis, and how Dr. Strawn might have been able to help?
Well, the only thing I vividly recall is that when the client indicated that there was, this nick of the popliteal artery, I immediately thought, well, that must be malpractice. And it led to complications and difficulties for that potential client. When I talked to Dr. Strawn, he, spent a lot of time to me and explained to me that was not necessarily malpractice, and that is a risk inherent in this type of surgery, and helped me understand that. And when I finished talking with him, it completely reversed my thinking and understood better that this is not a malpractice case as I initially thought. And then when I explained it to the client, and she accepted it and understood better as well. So that was one that I would, had I not talked to the doctor, I may have, filed a claim and gone in front of a panel here in Louisiana. But having talked to him, I saved myself that trouble and would have inevitably been a loss in the panel, which is never fun to have to endure.
Sure. Obviously, here we've been focusing on the hey, stay clear. I do recall, Lewis, and you mentioned it's more of your father's case, but you're involved a little bit on the Kainalua matter. Again, I might be mispronouncing that. It's one that I just would like to share with the group, and I don't think you have to say too much, Lewis, because I know it wasn't your case, but I remember first reviewing it for your father 4.5 years ago. And it's a multidisciplinary case where, long and short, it's a very young woman, has a handful of comorbidities, ended up having a kidney stone, very infective on every antibiotic you could possibly think of. The urologist basically said, let's do something as an outpatient. She was sent home. She got really septic and, ended up really going down the wrong course. And as part of that case, I think the initial thought was that the primary care team was at fault. But after reviewing it, what we ended up determining actually was that the primary care team did the correct consultation. So it wasn't really a general medicine issue. The urologist, by having that outpatient recommendation, on top of that, actually, there was a whole issue with the resident not being supervised and a note not being co-signed in a timely fashion. So there was also that. So not only did we end up getting a couple urology experts, as I recall, just for you folks to speak to help consult and then also be your expert, but we also worked up the case from an administrative perspective. And so you could consider that non-medical. I think it was an RN at the end who, I don't know how it's really playing into the case, but I believe was helping your father out with the understanding of co-signing notes. How quickly should this occur? I mean, those are really important issues when you're talking about supervision of residents. I just know, having been a resident myself, that there are some severe deficiencies in the process, and they really need to be called out when they occur. And so because of our unique backgrounds, we're able to, and along with Lewis and Mike, Lewis's father, their expertise on the legal side, able to start to make a case there out of that.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I wasn't directly involved in that case, but I know I had many conversations with my father about it, who was the main attorney on that case. And, he told me on numerous occasions how helpful you and your team and were in terms of prosecuting that case and understanding things. And I know I'll also speak on behalf of my father, who, as you know, calls you, Ross, on multiple occasions to ask you medical questions on cases that we're litigating, and you're always prompt and you get back to them and help answer medical questions, which is, right away, which is such an invaluable resource. And I know my father is always talking about how great of a resource that is and how helpful that is to us when we're prosecuting and litigating one of these complex medical malpractice cases.
That's wonderful to hear. Betty, let me know there are a couple of questions. Before we get to those questions, just to feed off of that, Lewis, and really appreciate those thoughts. Just to let everyone else be aware, our turnaround time for reviewing these cases is generally 3 to 5 business days, depending on the actual case. We'll let you know ahead of time. So usually within the week or the following week, in actuality, we've already had the time to consume this case, gotten our summaries ready, and then we're on the phone with you. So our turnaround is very quick, and that's something that we pride ourselves on. And then you also brought up somewhat quick questions as well. So those are instances where you don't actually send us any records and you just want to pick our brain. Possibly the popliteal artery one could have been an example, except the devil was really in the details with that. So we really had to see the records on that and some of the imaging. But as simple a question as, is the popliteal artery at risk during these surgeries? I mean, that would be a little bit of an open-ended question, but more specifically for me, and this does not, in the terms of working with us, and again, just ask us if you have any questions, doesn't count as a formal engagement. I often get asked questions like personal injury cases, just had someone unrestrained, rear-ended, 20 miles per hour, airbags deployed, now has hearing loss on the left and tinnitus. Talking about our perspectives on that, picking my brain about the experiences we've had at Expert Institute, finding experts on these cases, my personal experience and my publication experience in ENT, and bringing that all together for just a simple quick question could be really powerful. And that's what my doctors are here for. If you haven't heard me say it before, and Lewis probably has heard it a million times, our team is to be seen as extensions of the firms with whom we work. We are extensions of their firm. We're a phone call away. You have one point of contact, and then we'll source that doctor to answer that quick question within that 24-hour period. If you need a quicker turnaround, just let us know. So really appreciate that, Lewis. So Betty, it sounds like we have a few questions.
And one I think tied really well into your previous point, Dr. Green, about just alternative ways that you can help, can lean upon the team. We have a question that reads, do the advising doctors have experience as expert witnesses? Are they then engaged as expert witnesses? And if yes, what is the success rate? So I think, Dr. Green, that would be a good one for you.
Yeah, it's kind of a multifaceted question. It's a great one. So the first answer, if you're working with our internal doctor of 60 plus doctors, there are a few specialties, and we're happy to share them, that we would be able to help filing and signing affidavits, but it really depends on your jurisdiction and state. So we handle those on case-by-case basis. If everyone can understand, every single state is widely different than the state next to it. So we really have to work on that basis as to whether my internal doctors could then act as an expert to sign an affidavit for you. Really, the question, though, was about testifying experts, I believe, which would feed into our expert search process. So that's outside of my main doctor. So let's say either A, you don't want us to review the case and you just know which experts you want, or as is most often the case, you send us the files and you say, well, which experts do you think I need? Or based on your review, it sounds like I need a gastroenterologist and an ENT, let's say, as a testifying expert. Those folks are the ones that are going the distance with your case. And the key is not because my doctors are lazy, for any lack of a better term. It's actually that it's a core principle of how we work. Our experts that we source you, that are your testifying experts, have no relationships with Expert Institute. We don't pay them, they don't pay us. Therefore, the doctors on my team are on our payroll. It's pretty obvious, and therefore can't be your testifying experts, just in line with that principle. And that principle is really based on what our plaintiff attorneys and our clients have told us about what is best for them. And we just follow that example and follow suit by saying, yeah, we're not going to source you an expert that's on our payroll. There's an obvious bias that's inherent there. As for the success rate, that would be dependent on that individual expert, of course. So hopefully that answered that question, but it's a two-part answer. If you want us internally, it'll depend on the case. Otherwise, we could beautifully work it up and consult on that case. And then in either event, if you need someone to go to depositions and trial, we would go ahead and go through an expert search process for that.
We have a few questions, Dr. Green, along these lines, but we did get one question about, do your in-house physicians charge by the hour? What is the pricing structure for working with Expert Institute's doctors?
Great. Yeah, so if you're working with us and you've never worked with us before on a one-off basis, sending us records that are under 1,000 pages is going to be $3,250, depending on your deadlines and the complexity of the case. That price might go up, but usually it's around the $3,250 to $3,500 range. For working with us more comprehensively under a partnership with which Lewis is under this model, that's going to depend on the size of the firm and the contract we put in place. There are no hidden secrets. The larger contract that we come up with, meaning the more times you want to use my doctors, you want to use the expert search, or you need literature, or you want us to do some research on the opposing counsel's expert or your own experts, depending on how many times you've agreed that you feel like you would use us, we then structure a contract based on that. And obviously, the more times you would say you would use us, that price per time you reach out to us will go down. But no matter what, under a partnership, the price per time you would reach out, so sending us a case from $3,250 to $3,500 should be cut about in half, if not even 2/3 of the price of that. But again, depends on the contract. I'm sure that wasn't the most rewarding of answers, but is the honest truth of how we work. And transparently, I'm sure Lewis can attest to, at the end of each period, we go to Lewis and his father and say, how many times do you think you're going to use us this year? They let us know, and we structure a contract that way.
And they've been very easy and reasonable to work with as well. I mean, we've negotiated on some of the contracts, but they've always been very reasonable, and that's why we've continued to re-up our contract every year.
Appreciate that, Lewis.
One final question for Dr. Green. This attendee is saying, I don't do a ton of med mal in my current practice. Most of my cases revolve around products, mass tort, and some single event personal injury. Would your doctors be able to help with that?
Absolutely. Wonderful question. This is actually something I think, Lewis, we spoke about maybe a year ago and maybe even surprised you. It's very honest and candid. I think we do a great job of marketing the med mal. And I think when you see doctors, it's very easy to say, yeah, I would use them for my med mal cases. But as Betty alluded to, we actually don't work just on med mal. It's about almost an even-ish split between med mal and then other, which would be products, mass tort, personal injury. And so my doctors are very well versed with those cases. For personal injury cases, we're often helping with causation damages. Obviously, liability, we can help you find a non-medical expert like an accident reconstructionist, slip and fall expert, human factors expert. But my doctors are really good at the causation damages for the more tricky catastrophic cases, the run-of-the-mill ones, though, with patients who have tons of comorbidities. And then cases, as I mentioned, where you're not so sure about the damages. So someone tore the rotator cuff during a motor vehicle accident. You know, what is that really going to mean for this patient long-term? I would have Dr. Strawn or one of my other orthopedic surgeons get on the line with you and work up what in the future is likely to be seen from a damages perspective to help you understand if it's the case you want to move forward. For mass tort, as an ENT, I've been very heavily involved in the 3M litigation. I'm very privy to where we are on those cases. I've reviewed personally a ton of them. Those cases, and depends on what you're looking for, but for the 3M cases, I think it's a great example to use. For our partnership clients, I can't even recall the number. I would sit down individually with these attorneys. We would go through how to read, if you're not familiar with the 3M Combat Earplugs, it's about hearing loss and tinnitus in the Army population for folks who had defective earplugs created by 3M, and 3M has admitted that they were defective. Now they've claimed they're bankrupt and there's a whole subsidiary and they're kind of doing a Texas two-step, but we could talk about that at a later date. It's very interesting where we are. But what I did at the outset, I brought folks up to speed on how to read audiograms. What is tinnitus? What's the pathophysiology? You don't really know, stuff like that, and really working through some of the issues there. Then reading through the records and deciding how strong is this case on your docket? Is this a case you want to get specific experts, case-specific experts for this case, or is it a case that you got to tell the client, hey, you had hearing loss before, and here are the reasons why we can't take your case, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a full workup of the medical records, the cases, and then having a frank discussion over Zoom, phone call, whatever works best for our clients to discuss our findings. And then at the tail end of that, as was often the case, they would say, yeah, for this case, I need an ENT and an audiologist. For this case, I don't. For this case, I need an audiologist. For this one, I don't. And then we would determine geographically where are best to get these experts to maximize your bang for your buck.
We have another question in the queue I'm happy to answer. And thank you all for hanging on the line with us, by the way. I know we're a bit over time. This question is in regards to a different service of ours called Expert Radar. And it reads, can you elaborate on your research of experts? Meaning, what else do you have that is not available for an attorney? We use publications, reviews, Lexis on expert witnesses, all public sources. What is your added value to this range of search? As I mentioned, this is in regards to an alternative service of ours, Expert Radar, which is everything you could possibly want to know on an expert, whether that be an opposing expert or retained. And happy to provide further information via email about what exactly we include, like this attendee mentioned, that you wouldn't just be able to find online, but it does really run the gamut. We have our own repository of deposition and trial transcripts that's exclusive to Expert Institute for one. For physicians, we have exclusive access to their clinical activity through their insurance claims. We can actually see how often they're submitting claims for surgeries they're doing, drugs they're prescribing, the types of patients that they're treating. And then we're also able to let you know if we detect any updates to that expert's background. So our technology allows us to immediately notify you if an expert were to switch jobs or publish something new or have one of their certifications lapse. That's a really nice added value as well, because you would be first to know if anything comes up, either for your retained expert or your opposing expert, to be as prepared as possible without anything being a surprise before your deposition or trial, whenever it might be. So a little bit of a different question, but certainly wanted to address that while there was interest. I think those were all the questions. We did have one final one, which is, how do we contact you for more questions? You can either visit our website, which is expertinstitute.com, and there is a contact form that you can fill out, or we also have a general email, info@expertinstitute.com. And of course, if you wanted to email Dr. Green directly, you can do that as well. But all of our information is listed on our website, and we can definitely connect further about all of our different offerings. Louis, definitely appreciate your time. And of course, it's been a pleasure working with you, and looking forward to, of course, continuing the relationship. And Dr. Green, thank you for your time as well, and expanding upon this fantastic service of ours a little bit more. Louis, Dr. Green, anything that either of you wanted to wrap up with?
No, I'm good. I just, once again, want to emphasize how pleased I am with Dr. Green and his team at the Expert Institute.
Well, really appreciate it, Louis, and just want to thank you. I will be sending you an email after this to get your favorite whiskey or wine recommendation, because I owe you, but really do appreciate it. For any folks out there, I know Louis, his father, and the firm down there, they take on, I know the landscape has changed with COVID, but they're taking on some really hard-hitting cases. So if you happen to have a client in New Orleans and need a co-counsel or need to refer a case over, I know Louis has taken on these really tough cases, and they're the guys to send it over to. So let us know if you need his contact information. But thank you everyone for attending. Really appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.